Hello, I am Julie Vanderhast. Welcome to Truth Bumps. Today I want to talk to you about excavation. That may sound funny, and I'm not talking about the building site excavation. I'm talking about inner excavation. The work that happens when we have to uncover ourselves after years and years of trauma. When you have experienced lots of trauma, like I have spent 37 years. From the time I was about 4 is my earliest memory. I grew up in a household that was often full of rage and raised voices. There was very strict punishments for things that were determined to be crimes, crimes against or FAPO against the household or against my father, disrespect, rated largely on that. I loved him very much, very deeply. He was also a great source of love for me. It led to a very long, confusing relationship on what it is that love actually looks like, with my mother, who was very distant and emotionally unavailable, and then my father, who was quite volatile but also very loving. So it was difficult as I got older because I didn't really understand what it was to have a healthy love. I recognized later, after I started my journey to healing, that my mum potentially was a battered wife, and in the sense that there was potentially a lot of coercive control in my house. My father was very exacting, and he liked things the way he liked things, and it was often a confrontation point in our household. So, and I think there wasn't any kind of lesser punishment for being honest or for accepting punishment or acknowledging responsibility. I think that applied to my mum as well. Not that she spoke about it, but just now that I look at it through clearer eyes, that's what I can see. And I think when we start to heal, people talk about finding yourself again. I feel like for me and for people who have experienced lots and lots of trauma, I feel like I said, it's more like an excavation, like an organized archaeological dig, where you sort of start out with a very small brush and then work your way up to the removal of these major moments in your life that have affected the way that you perceive the world. I also had a lot of time, so my father and I were very close. It was a very volatile relationship, though. He was very strict, and I was punished often. And just for silly things, really, like not having correct answers, not being able to answer in the right amount of time, for just kid stuff, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, doing things that you don't know are wrong until you know they're wrong, and then and I got quite strict, scary punishments from my father. As much as I loved him, I was also very scared of him. And that carried over into my relationships with men. I recognized that there was an element of that with all of the men that I have been with, actually, where they were very good men. I saw very good, I could see the goodness in each of those men, but they were also very scary men in their own way, and quite intimidating. So that I recognise now that carried over, but I'd also carried from my mum the distance and the complications with women. I recognise that also moved into my friendships with women. So, which I struggled to build real connections with women, and that complicated things because I didn't have that circle that I could go to that I felt that I could share with. Don't get me wrong, I've had circles of friends, and they were wonderful women, but they were, retrospectively, I acknowledge that they were sort of emotionally unavailable to some extent, but that wasn't on them. That was because that was what I was used to, and that's what I sought out. And but it was a constant point of confusion for me. I would be like, why do these women not choose me? Like my mum had not chosen me. And, well, that was my perception then. So I feel like after years, after my father passed away, I was involved in a relationship. Let's go back a little bit further. I started smoking cannabis when I was about 17 to manage my emotional bandwidth. I was already beginning to struggle with feeling out of place and not having, not feeling, I always had a sense of not really belonging. We moved an awful lot when I was young. I did 4 different primary schools, 5 different high schools. We didn't stay very long in one place, and even when we stayed in one town, we moved a lot. Amongst it, the house that I'm in now is actually the longest that I've ever lived in one home, and that's now 6 years. Even that includes my childhood. So stability was always a factor as well, contributing towards the trauma in my life, because I used to refer to it as my gypsy gene, but I recognize now that that was actually the instability and a lack of foundation that was created by the way that my parents moved around a lot, and we never really had a stable place. When I was living my childhood, I did not consider that to be a detriment. I had a wonderful childhood. I'm not at all knocking my parents for what they did. That's not, I need to be clear about that. I'm just, when I came through my last 8 years, I recognized that there were spaces that I was trying to fill because of the way my parents were, and my lack of understanding for why they were like that. And that actually consumed so much of my early life. That combined with the fact that I believe I had an early onset of bipolar, and that I was undiagnosed with autism and ADHD. So when I sort of stood in a room and I could feel the injustice, and I couldn't rationalize how people could just let this happen. That was the autism and the ADHD, like getting fixated in those spaces to the point where I would actually push people away, because I literally couldn't control my emotions. So when I was, after my father passed away, I was with the father of my first child, and my father had not made it to see my first child. This was a point of great angst for me, and my relationship with this man was strained because we hadn't intended to get pregnant. It wasn't meant to happen like that, and then I had decided to keep the child, and hell hath no fury, come hell or high water. I mean, like, I was keeping it, and I guess that made him feel trapped, like he had no choice. And I can see how that was the case now, but at the time, I felt that I had given him permission to leave. He didn't need to stay, and I thought that was enough. How young I was. So these are all things that led to greater, worse choices. So the onset of mental health that was undiagnosed for many years, and I went to many doctors when I was in Western Australia, and I asked them, I kept saying to them, I don't think there's something wrong, I feel like it's not right, I'm not right in some way. And they'd be like, no, you're just depressed, and later, as I became an addict, they said, it's because you're a drug addict, and I'd be like, but this was happening before I was a drug addict, you know. And they'd be like, no, like it's the drugs. Stop the drugs and your life will be okay. But when I finally moved away from the home of my trauma in WA, and I left to come to Victoria, here I finally got a diagnosis. I got clean. First, I got clean, and then I started to see doctors regularly. I put roots down. I got a house. I worked, and I started to get some real progress with what had been my life. So it started obviously with my GP, and then that built to a psychiatrist, and then a psychologist, and now I have a dietitian, and all these other things too. So I have a phenomenal support network. I didn't excavate myself by myself, but in saying that, you can't be with your doctors and your medical support team every day of the week. You're not. You see them once a month, once a fortnight, whatever it is. So they're not with you all the time. So I initially needed a lot more than what I was getting from even the great support network I have here. So that meant that I had to get creative. And I started to really listen to what my body needed and started to create structure, which, because what I worked out is, as these diagnoses became prevalent and I started to become medicated, there needed to be things that filled the spaces between where all the noise used to be from when I was an addict and from when all of these things happened, right? From all of the violence, which was now closing down because I had been doing all the work. And what was left was these spaces of autism and ADHD, which I was very unfamiliar with. And now I have been creating these strategies, you know, so the healthy habits and journaling prompts for those who never know how to start to write a journal, because that was a lot of my problem. I had so much in my head, but I never knew how to start to write. And now I love to write, and I created those prompts in the hope that they would help people to write for connection to themselves, because that's how it helped me. And I hope it will help in a variety of ways for others. But the excavation came in small sections. It came with a lot of support in my safety net. So knowing I had a good, strong medical support team that was listening to what I had to say, and then allowing myself to have the space to really look back at what had gone on, to who I was then, and also to really embrace her and say thank you for getting me through some of the most difficult days of my life. In fact, the most difficult days of my life, and for not giving up, for continuing to push, for continuing to fight, for being a survivor. I think sometimes that the shame for our poor choices can override what should simply just be a matter of gratitude. Once we begin to heal, of course, maybe the person who was in those moments didn't do all of the right things, and maybe those choices weren't ideal, but those choices also got that version of me from where they were to where I was, to the point where I could begin to heal, where I took that responsibility, and I stopped waiting for somebody to come and rescue me, and I moved across the country away from the things that were keeping me stuck in that trauma loop, including the drugs. And I made a decision to stop using, to stop being a victim in my own life story, to start being somebody who was taking real part in healing and moving forward. Because for something to change, I had to change it. I had to stop waiting for it to happen to me like everything else had happened to me. I needed to be responsible for it. And at some point, I think that is the key. We are not to blame for our trauma, but we are responsible for how we heal and when we do. And I wish I had just learnt that a little bit earlier. But, you know, again, I learned so much in those years where I was dishonoring who I am and the people I loved. And it wasn't with any intention. Like, you don't get up in the morning and go, right, well, today I am absolutely going to piss off everybody that I love, right? I'm going to hurt them with everything that I have. That's not what people do, right? When people are wounded and they're unhealed and they're addicted, they don't think properly and they don't consider anything outside of the immediate moment. So they don't, like, I distinctly can tell you that I didn't consider the repercussions of my actions. And I am still dealing with the repercussions of my actions from over almost a decade ago. That is the truth and the reality of the poor choices from my past. You don't, even though I have done 8 years sober and clean, and even though I have moved into my healing space with a full body yes, there is still things that I have to do and things that still keep me connected to that version of myself. But I think that it's all about understanding that I am just a person. I am a human being living a very life human experience, and that mine was really loud for a long time. And now my purpose in life is to hone and garner a life of peace, and I really want to contribute to others experiencing that. And that's why I built the things that I have built, and that's why half of everything that I make goes towards my ultimate dream of the Dandelion Farm, which would be a place that would bridge the connection between crisis point and recovery, and to full-blown life yeses from everybody who's been through it, whether that's individuals or families. It's something that I'm very deeply passionate about. I am going to close it off there for today, and I hope that I haven't rambled too much and that you have found some golden nuggets of information in amongst all of that. And I will be back again another day to talk to you about some more wonderful things that come with the journey of healing. Thank you. I am Julie Vanderhaast. This is Truth Bumps. Thank you very much.